Well, hello. Good to see you. Well, I'm not seeing you, but some of you will be seeing me anyway. So we are coming down to the end of the semester, and we're into our last topics that we're going to be talking about. And our last couple of topics are going to be reproduction. When, and so this might be, if you didn't ever take sex education in high school, this is your chance. So we're going to be talking about reproduction in general, and then we'll be talking a little bit about male and female reproduction, aspects of reproduction, and then on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about development. So we're going to talk about the two sexes today and some introductory remarks. And then on Thursday, we'll add a little more, and we'll have one more test, and then we will have a final next week. So that's kind of to give you a feel for the way things are going. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving and you're all set to go for the one final push towards the end. We're almost done. All right, so chapter 8, we are going to be talking about reproduction and development. And I have my notes down here so that I can reference whatever slide I'm on. The first 3 or 4 slides are a little bit descriptive, so I don't necessarily have to tell you which one I'm on at this point, but we will when we get to some of the pictures and things of that sort. All right, so oftentimes couples will have problems conceiving, and it ends up, I guess, maybe 20% of couples who say, honey, let's have a baby. They have problems. They have problems having babies, and I guess that's over 5 million people in America anyway. And so I've even had friends do this, that sometimes people turn to high-tech approaches, in vitro fertilization, and that kind of thing. So there are some alternatives that are out there. These kinds of problems, of course, can lead to frustrations and finger pointing and saying, it's your fault. No, it's, and then they're saying, your partner is saying, no, it's not my fault, it's your fault. Well, it ends up, scientists have studied this, and it ends up it's likely, it's not more likely to be the man nor the woman's fault. Sometimes, I guess in 40% of the cases, it's the man. 40% of other cases, it's going to be the woman. And that leaves 20% where they're really not sure what the problem is. It's just, not happening for whatever reason. So after conception, you have development, and as I said, we'll be talking more about that when I meet with you semi-live, as they say, virtually, but live on Thursday morning. We'll talk a little bit more about development, and this is, as they say, a bridge between the gene and the whole organism. And you guys at this point are experts on genes, right? We just went through a whole big discussion of how genes are expressed and become proteins, and proteins then they can be structural, of course, or they can be enzymes that create the other kinds of macromolecules that make up each and every one of us. And so this is kind of an extension of what we were just talking about with gene expression. This is the connection between genes and the whole organism. Okay, so how do boys and girls find each other? Now, if we're talking about humans, we all know, you say, Hi, cutie. Yeah, it's one way of meeting somebody or scaring someone off. But you know what I mean. You know, when we're talking about humans, we all have experiences along those lines, but this is biology. It's not just human biology. And so we have mechanisms where the boys and the girls can find each other, and in some cases, if you think about birds or humans, in the case of birds, some of them are very beautiful. They're brightly colored. Now, what's interesting in the animal kingdom, you know, non-human animals, oftentimes it's the male who is brightly colored, and this plays a role in reproduction. Some of you might have an aquarium at home, and you might have had an experience with guppies. Guppies are these incredibly brightly colored fish. And it ends up, the girls like the pretty boys. They literally have a preference for beautiful boys. Now, in the wild, so if you think about it, so those beautiful colors are attractive to the girls. They're also attractive to predators. And so they've done studies in the Caribbean where you have native populations of guppies. And what they found is if you're in a native wild setting where there aren't any visual predators, the males are brightly colored like you see at the aquarium store. But if you are in a place where there is a visual predator, usually the males are drab. Why is that? They got eaten. Yeah. Sorry to say, they get eaten. So there's a downside to that. But visually, birds, cardinals, bright colored birds, fish. In humans, of course, the babes get all dolled up, right? So, you know, that's a visual attraction as well. There are other kinds of ways for organisms to find each other. There's a kind of a moth called a lunar moth. What does lunar mean? It's moon, right? So it's a moth that is active at night. And so if you are active at night, these visual cues aren't much help. So they use chemical signals. And this isn't just lunar moths. There are lots of creatures out there that use chemical signals to find each other, and these things are called pheromones. They're smells, but the moth can follow the pheromone trail at such minute concentrations that it isn't something that you could actually smell, but they can detect it and find their mates. One other one other cue that can be used, and I gave it away, is sound. Crickets. So think about crickets. Well, that's a way that they find each other. Now, what other way might insects find each other? We have some really curious insects that are active in June. That's when you first start to see them. And they're lightning bugs. They're a night bug, and yet they find each other by flashing a light. So lightning bugs, that's another example of a visual cue for a nocturnal organism. All right, so we have some technical terms. This will be on slide 6. Ovum, that's an egg. Ovum or oocyte. They're interchangeable. They mean the exact same thing. An ovum generally would be like a mature egg, and an oocyte might be mature or it might still be developing. But they're pretty much interchangeable. And of course, sperm, so the egg or the ovum or oocyte is the primary sex organ for a female, and the primary sex organ for a male would be the sperm cell. So we had those. Now, we're used to thinking of organisms being what we would call dioecious, and that means having separate sexes. But in the animal world, and in the world, I keep saying animal, but we'll just say in the world in general, because they're plants. You have male plants and female plants, or sometimes you have plants that have both, right? So, and when you tend to think of most flowers, they have both the anther and the stigma, the male and the female parts. Well, in animals, you get that too. So if you think of an earthworm, everyone's favorite, right? That it has that thing, that sort of thick area behind its head, and that's called the clitellum. And on that, there's both a male part and a female part. And so what happens is if you have the head, at the tip of my finger, and the clitellum sort of here in the middle, for them to mate, another one comes together. They come together kind of like that, and they exchange, everything lines up, as they say, and they exchange sperm from one organism to the other. These organisms that have both male and female sexual parts are called hermaphrodites. One final point before I stop here, we've gone 11 minutes, is that has to do with fertilization. Maybe you like to watch Wild Kingdom or one of these shows on TV, and you've seen the salmon going up the stream, and they spawn. And they don't mate per se, but what happens is the female releases its eggs when the male is releasing its sperm. And now that would be external fertilization. And you often see that in the aquatic environment. Now, it doesn't really work in a terrestrial environment, right? Dumping some eggs on the ground and some sperm on the ground, they may not come together, as the saying goes. So the norm in the terrestrial environment is to have mating and have it be an internal fertilization. And that's what we have in humans, of course. All right, I'm going to stop right here because I've gone really long, but that's okay.